Hello, and welcome to Rock Your Block, where we outreach and highlight community impact. I'm your host, Larry Laws. On today's segment of First Home Alliance, we have a very special guest. She was born in Scotland, and in 1989, she came to the United States for a short visit and never went back. She's married, a mother of three, an entrepreneur, and homeowner. Please welcome to our show, Pauline Bonilla. Hello, Pauline. Now say your last name again.
Bonilla.
Bonilla. Yes. Pauline, well, thank you for coming in on Rock Your Block today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. How was your commute in?
It was okay. 495 was a little bit iffy, but it was okay.
Yes. Okay. Well, I would like for you to just tell our audience a little bit about you.
So like you said, I'm born and raised in Scotland. I came here in '89 when I was 17. For 3 months, actually. Americans came into the hotel that I was working at, and they wanted my friend to come and babysit for them. But she was older, so she said no. And the part of Scotland I'm from is a little bit, I guess ghetto is a better word that you could say. So I was like, well, why not? So I decided to come for 3 months, and I never went back. I mean, I did go back, but realized it was better for me to stay here.
Yes.
And then I met my husband. I didn't meet my husband for another 2 years or so afterwards.
Okay. And so during that time, that visit you came here, you come here to look for work, school?
So I was a nanny for a good 3 or 4 years. And then I met my husband, and then I started taking care of his daughter. He had 2 other children before we had children. So I started taking care of his Down syndrome daughter. I did that for a couple of years, and then we had our first child.
Okay, yes. And so you set up here, and so how did you meet your husband?
Actually, I met him in a bar,
Oh,
a
yeah.
nightclub. Usually we don't tell people that. But I met him in a nightclub, and it wasn't him I was attracted to. I just asked him, where we met him the week before, and asked him where his friend was, and then we started talking, and that was that.
Yeah, the rest is history.
Yeah,
Yes.
29 years later.
Wow. Okay. Yes. And so you have a family here now?
We do. We have 5 children, but 2 of them are his. They're older. They're 32 and 30 from a previous marriage, and then we have 3 adult children together. So we have a 28-year-old, a 24-year-old, and a 22-year-old. He just turned 22 last week.
Okay. Yes. I understand you've done some different work in the community and some different jobs. So what are some of the things that you've done?
So my very first job other than nannying was I was a photographer at Sears. I don't know if you remember when Sears did that. You would take your baby in and take pictures.
Yes.
And that's actually where I learned to speak. I'm not very good at it now, but I learned to speak Spanish.
Oh,
and
yes?
I always say that's how I lost my Scottish accent, because I learned to speak Spanish. But
Yes.
so I did that for a little while. Then I stopped working and started taking care of my Down syndrome stepdaughter, because they were going in and out of daycare, and the daycares weren't very good. So it was like, why not me do it and stay at home? So I stayed home, and then we had our first child, and I stayed home with her for a few years. Then after that, I started working in the airline for about 7 or 8 years. Moved up in the different airlines and became manager. I've done everything from ramp, customer service, dispatch, not dispatch, but dispatch for the pilots and trip trade, if they needed a day off or...
Yes.
And
Now, knowing Spanish at the time, was you able to use any of that?
I was in Sears. I was able
Yes.
to use it quite a lot because, and it was quite funny because when I was learning it, my husband has family from Spain, and my husband's from El Salvador, and the Spanish is completely different.
Okay.
So he would, and in the Seminary Road area, it was very heavy at the time. There was a lot of Salvadorians.
Yes.
So our Spanish nephew was teaching me, no, say this. My husband said, no, she can't say it that way because they're going to laugh at her and be like, what are you
Right.
talking about? So I always say I speak Salvadorian Spanish.
Okay.
I used it a lot because at the time my sister-in-law was sick, and I had to be the translator for her. So I learned it very quickly.
Okay.
So
Yes. And also, I see that you have interest. Is it a hobby or is it something that you do in reference to some, what's that,
So
nails?
it's
The nails that you
nail
do?
strips.
Okay.
They're yeah. I mean, I guess it's a hobby. I started doing it, because I liked it, and
Right.
then obviously it's a company so I'm an independent stylist. So I, purchased the nails, and they're basically real nail polish strips. I don't actually have them on today because I give myself a day or two without them on.
Okay.
And they're just easy, and I love working for the company or working with the company because they make it easy for me to sell. So, but I started it as a hobby, yeah.
That's great. Well, that's good. You're taking that next step, And you mentioned about helping out with your husband's daughter, son?
My husband's daughter.
Daughter. Did you expand that in doing some other community service?
I did. So I became her caregiver, and then I started working for the company that Medicaid provided for her, and I was doing it with. I had at least 5 or 6 different clients that I would
Right.
go to their house and help them with their children. Varied from cerebral palsy to all different kinds of things, Down syndrome. So I
Right.
did that for a few years. I forgot about that. Thanks for asking that.
Yes. I see that you do a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. And what are some of the other things you and your family like to do?
So now that the kids are older, they do their own thing. But when they were younger, we used to, the kids were all in soccer. So we did that. I took them at the nighttime, and we would take them to the games on Saturday, sometimes Sunday. We did vacations in Disney World, and we've gone back home to Scotland a couple of
Yeah.
times.
Okay. The whole family has visited there?
They have,
Yes.
yeah. My youngest more so than just because he likes to travel with me. So
Yes.
he's traveled more than what the other two, but they've all been there. And they've all been there as adults as well. So it was
Okay.
nice them being younger and then adults going.
Yes. And so I forgot, maybe I missed the connection. And so this DC area, have you always been here in this area?
I did. The people that I worked for, I came into right away into Arlington.
Okay.
And then I moved from Arlington and then went with a family in Vienna. And then from Vienna, we went to Alexandria.
Okay. All right. And so, so have you always owned, or have you rented as well?
We have rented. We rented an apartment. We got our very first apartment, and all we had was a TV and a mattress on the floor.
Oh yeah.
But we rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Shirlington actually. And if it was up to my husband, we most likely would still be there.
Yes.
But he doesn't like to venture out. But I decided I wanted to buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
So we started, and at the time, 20 years ago, nobody really knew Manassas Park.
Correct.
And my husband worked in D.C., so we drove out, and there was hardly anything out there. But our first house was in Manassas Park.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. And so, what drove you? Why did you want to be a homeowner and not continue to rent?
I came from Scotland to make something of myself. I didn't want to, do the typical rent, and I wanted to have that, not big house, but house with a picket fence. I never did get the picket fence,
Oh, yeah.
but or the white picket fence. It just was, we did the renting thing, and then once I convinced my husband, look, we're making somebody else rich, it was just better owning a house.
Yes. Okay. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that house. But right now we're going to take a short break. But before we go, I would like to remind you that First Home Alliance is a HUD-approved housing counseling agency serving the National Capital Area. If you're a first-time homebuyer or a homeowner in need of a mortgage assistance, please visit the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to find a HUD-approved housing counseling agency in your area. We'll be right back after the break. Stay tuned.
With First Home Alliance. A little bit about First Home Alliance. We are a HUD-approved housing counseling agency that was established in 2002 by our executive director, Larry Law. He established the nonprofit. He established it because his mother purchased her first home at the age of 65. And everyone was like, how did you do that? Because her income was really low. And so that's how he found out about the USDA program. And so through the USDA program, his mother was able to purchase her first home. It intrigued him to see how he could help individuals basically experience the American dream of homeownership. So he established a nonprofit. Mission is to increase home ownership to low to moderate income families. And so what does First Home Alliance do?
Welcome back. You're watching Rock Your Block. I'm your host, Larry Laws of First Home Alliance. If you're just now tuning in, we're joined today with entrepreneur and homeowner, Pauline Bonilla. Pauline, just before we went on the break, you was talking about the house that you're in. Give me a little backstory in reference to how did you find that house?
That particular house, there's a real estate agent in our neighborhood that was just, her name was everywhere. And we had unfortunately gotten hit by when the market crashed, we had gotten hit, and the last house we had, the loan officer sold us pretty much a bad loan, an 80-20, and it was impossible to get out. So fast forward, and we had to give up that house because our son got sick, and
So the house you're in there is the second house?
It's actually our third house.
The third.
Our third house. We sold. We had the very first house was in Manassas. They're all been in Manassas Park.
Okay.
So we had one house, a smaller house, and then we sold that. And
How long was you in that first house?
first house we were in 4 or 5 years, I think.
Okay.
We did a lot of work in it, and then we sold it and moved. I don't know if you know Manassas Park, but there's an old side and a new side, and I
Okay.
wanted to be in the new side, so we went over to the new side and bought a bigger house because the kids were they needed the space.
Okay.
So, but again, unfortunately, we got hit with the market and we couldn't get out of the loans.
And this was the second house?
This was the second house.
Yeah. Back to the first house, that home, you sound like it was a smaller home.
It was a smaller home,
smaller
one
home.
level, yeah.
Yeah, and you basically looked for that home because you wanted more space, and it was a little bit different from being a renter, and so you wanted to own.
Well, the first house, we bought it. So we
Okay.
went from buying that, and it was smaller, but another thing, unfortunately, my mother passed away in that house while she was
Okay.
visiting me. So I now I'd like to buy it back, but at the time, it just wasn't sitting right with me, so I wanted to move, and then we sold that house and bought another
You
house.
sold that one and transitioned to another house, which
Right.
was a larger home now?
Much larger, yeah.
Much larger, okay. And so with this, was you traditional financing, or have you used?
So
any-
the first one, we did an 80-20 loan.
Okay,
And we were able to refinance the first one before the market, the 80% loan before the market crashed.
okay,
And then I spent I spent a couple of months trying to get help for the second house,
okay,
for the second loan, but nobody could help us. What they told us was, you have to default on your loan first. And we had
Okay.
owned the house, we've never defaulted in our loan in 10 years. And then it turned out that they couldn't help us. But we had to, once I got over my pride and swallowed that, our son got really sick, was in the hospital for a week, and we didn't know what was wrong with him.
okay.
And with my husband and I both being first generation immigrants, we swallowed our pride and realized home is where we make it.
Yes,
So we had to give that house up, and we rented for about 2 years.
okay, all right. So you gave that one up, you ran it for a couple of years, and then you qualified for another?
Yeah, we
home?
talked to a loan officer. He told us exactly what we needed to do for the 2
Okay.
years. In 2 years, we'd own a house. So I did exactly what he said to
great.
do. And then in 2 years, we were qualified.
Okay.
And again, the house we're in now, we've been in 11 years,
Okay, and this is the second home?
third.
Okay, now let's talk about the second home. How did you transition from the second home? How long were you there for the second home?
We were there 4 or 5 years, 3
4 or
years.
5? Okay.
3 years. And then after we gave it up, we rented for 2 years.
Okay, and then was during the crisis on that
Yeah,
second
it was
one?
when the market crashed,
Okay.
when it hit the area really bad.
Okay, so you experienced that, and then did you go back and rent again?
We rented for about 2 years, yeah. We rented the 2 years while we were waiting until we could actually buy a house again.
Okay.
And that's the house we're in now.
Okay. Well, that transition that you seem to have went, I'm not saying it's smooth, but that is a process of going from homeowner, transitioning to renter, then transitioning back to homeowner. So those are very important steps, and it seemed that you transitioned each time successfully, and it seemed like there was no fear in doing it.
I mean, there was fear. There was definitely fear. We at first, after we gave up the one house, because what we did is we sat the children down. They were a little bit older, and we sat them down and we said, look, we can keep the house, because I think with it being so high, the mortgage was going to be like $4,000 a month.
Okay.
And we told the children, we can keep the house, but there will be no vacations. There will be no video games. Like, it will be very, very tight. And the children said no, they wanted their video games.
Oh, yes.
Some people say we should never involve the children, but it was a family decision we had to make. And then, like I said, my son got really sick, and we didn't know what was wrong with him. It was just out of the blue.
Yes.
So then we rented, and we were going to, we had said, oh, well, renting is a great thing. And then I think we were there 6 months. It's like, absolutely not. We're not doing this whole renting thing. So
Yes.
we started doing what we needed to do to buy the next house.
Yes. Okay. So you purchased it, and it seemed like during your process of purchasing a home, you actually talked to the loan officer and make sure that you had your finances right.
Right. He told us
before
exactly
going to shop for the house.
He told us exactly what we needed to do.
Yes.
And we kept in touch. Like I said, there was a real estate agent in the area that she pretty much was well known in Manassas Park and the Blooms Crossing area. That's where we live. And she took us to see one house. She was the seller and the buyer. And she
Yes.
took us to see the house that we're in. And funny, I went to actually go see it with my husband's ex and the stepchildren.
Okay.
And I went to go see, and she's like, well, talk to your husband. I said, I don't need to talk to my husband. I want this house. This is what we're going to do. And we've been there 10 years, 11 years.
11 years. Well, it really seemed like you were driven to home ownership.
Right.
Versus, what is the big thing about home ownership versus renting? What is the big thing with that?
It just feels like it's yours. You can, I mean, and the pride of, I mean, you don't really own it, right? The bank own it, but it's a little bit different, I mean, I've always wanted to own a home. So I came to America to live the dream, and
Yes.
living the dream is not renting. Yeah, I'm not saying renting's bad, but I wanted to live the dream.
So is that part of the freedom, I guess,
Right.
of home ownership?
Because I like to change things a lot.
Okay. Yes. All right. And so do you look at this as something that I know you're passing a lot of knowledge on to your children? Would that be something, maybe the ownership and maybe the home itself, or the equity in the home, that's something you pass to your next generation?
Yeah, our youngest son is actually in the business. He does media for a real estate agent, and he's always talking about, making money off of a house. If it was up to him, we would sell our house now so that we could sell it, make money, and then buy, a house. But we've told him, no, we're not doing that.
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
not ready to sell because we've done a lot of work. But almost every day he says, you need to sell because the market's crazy.
Yes. And what are some of the other advantages of being a homeowner?
Tax break. You get the
Okay.
tax break at the end of the year. So
Okay.
now that we don't have the children, it helps a lot.
Yes, well, that's great. Yes. Now, with all the enthusiasm of having a home, is there agony in losing it?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Like when we lost the second house, not the first house. It took me a long time to get over my pride because, and I cried almost every day because I didn't come to America to buy a house and lose a house. But again, once I got over my pride and I exhausted everything, and our son got sick, we just bit the bullet and said, we got to let it go.
Yes, and so you went through the crisis, and that was over a decade ago, and now recently we just was hit with another
Right.
pandemic, which causes financial hardship as well. And so what experience did you have during the pandemic this time?
So luckily, I was able to keep my job. For the last 15 years, I've worked in customer service in different museums, and luckily, I was able to keep my job and work from home. Unfortunately, my husband was not. March 15th was his last day of he works in DC, and he's worked for the same company for 30 years. 32 years for the same individual, but the same place for 30 years. So he didn't work since March 15th of last year. So we went into, we did the whole forbearance and everything because he was on unemployment, and it took a little while for that to come through, and it's nowhere near what he was making. So we had to make some choices, but I had told my husband and everybody, I'm not losing my house again. You know, we've just put too much into it, and this is where we want to stay. So it was tough for us, and they just opened up last week.
Okay.
So they were closed for an entire
over a year. Yes. And so it seemed that you was on a forbearance, and so you hadn't paid your mortgage in some months. How far back on the mortgage were you behind?
I think 6 months. I think we were about 6 months we were behind.
Okay. And so, I think that you reached out to First Home Alliance. How did you hear about the mortgage and rental assistance at First Home Alliance?
So I like to shop at thrift stores. And, I'm a very big thrift store, and I have a friend that owned a thrift store, and we've been friends for probably 10 years now. Mm-hmm. And she just one day texted me and asked me, do you know anybody that needs help, or and to be honest with you, I didn't believe her.
Yes.
We've been friends for a long time, and I was like, yeah, okay. Nothing is for nothing, But anyway, she told me about this company, about your company. And I said, okay, well, I'll do it. I talked to my husband about it, and he said the same thing, nothing's for nothing. And I said, well, why don't we just try it? We weren't worried about losing our house because we had told, that the mortgage companies and everything were saying that they were going to help, and, there was different plans to do. So, but I reached out to Charlene, I believe.
Okay. All right. Pauline, well, I want to thank you for coming in today. And I'm glad that First Home Alliance with the Financial Emergency Clinic was able to help you keep your home and bring you back current with your mortgage.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this interview with entrepreneur and homeowner Pauline Bonilla. For more information, you can visit her website or follow her on social media. I am Larry Laws of First Home Alliance, and it has been a pleasure sharing with you our mission and highlighting the impact of our services. If you have questions about financial fitness or how we can help make your dream of homeownership a success, send your question to our inbox at help@firsthomealliance.org. And tune in to our next show to see if your question was selected to be shared with our audience. You can easily get more information about our services by visiting us on the website at firsthomealliance.org. Thank you for watching today's segment of First Home Alliance, and join us next time to rock your block.
Glad to know that, some of this stuff about credit and buying houses is written down somewhere. A lot of the times it's always hearsay, like other friends or family members who have bought houses before, but they can never, tell you legit what you need to get done and do before buying a house.
I definitely think this class should be required for all first home buyers, because a lot of times the real estate agent doesn't explain the process to you. So I think this is very important.
It's from the credit up to receiving a loan, and the most important thing is the process that you go through when you're buying the house, and there are a lot of process which you don't have idea about that before you take this class.
Speakers who came up and spoke about each section, they were very knowledgeable in their field, and I felt like it was relatable. They didn't just throw out a whole bunch of terms that went over my head, but they really explained it in a way to where I understood it, and I could even explain it to my children, and it was even easier for me to take home and kind of remember and process and apply to my next steps. The process was amazing.
They start first with the class before even finding a lender or agent. Because I did all that and I wasn't able to purchase. And then I was like, oh, you know what? There's a lot of information I'm not aware of. Let me just start from the beginning to put everything on hold. Start from the
Piecing the information together, because you've heard things about the loans and about this and about the credit, but this is like a summary, and it just gives a clear flow of where to go with what you have and kind of building up a plan. So that kind of gives me a whole picture of where I needed to go and how to get there.